Patch, God of Ratch. Twitter comment, 2018. In response to Bandai Namco announcing a patch for Dark Souls Remastered. Patch backstaps. Twitter comment, 2018. In response to Bandai Namco announcing a patch for Dark Souls Remastered. I've never played around with spells in Dark Souls 3. I mentioned this in an earlier video. They weren't a lot of fun, in my opinion, and that's just my opinion. It's not a fact. Far from it. It's an opinion. And it was true for me, in my subjective experience, from the life I'd lived. I had found sorceries in Dark Souls 3 to be not fun. Dark Souls 1, it never occurred to me to slap some spells on my intelligence build. How odd is that? That's how far removed I am from casting spells. Typically just a straight melee sort of player. Still am, but decided to just slap some spells on here for the sake of doing it. You know, just to see what it was like, see what it was about. Originally, I'd intended to take my soul level 56 intelligence build, and he had 30 intelligence. I was going to give him 28 faith, and Velka's talisman, and give him Wrath of the Gods, and just have like a bit of a rip-off of Martyr's Brigade's build. I think his has 40 intelligence and 30 faith. But I had pissed off Rhea, who sells you the good miracles, and as such, I was unable to unpiss her off. Like, you can't, if you've killed her people, what's his name, Bullcut, if you've killed him, Thorland Man, if you've killed him, you can't just ask for forgiveness and have her forgive you for that. She just will always hate you. So I said, okay, well, since I can't do that, screw it, I'll just make an intelligence build. So I gave him 42 intelligence, I think, is what we ended up at. And gave him some spells. Strong Magic Shield. Pursuers. And Dark Orb. And it's a lot of fun. I'm enjoying it a lot. Those spells don't have like a lot of requirements to meet, and they do good damage. And they don't require, like, you can wear the Dusk Crown if you want to, but you don't have to. I can still do good damage. And they act as a sort of offset for my melee damage. They fill in the blanks of the build very well without requiring too much. I don't have to wear 2 rings to get damage that isn't laughable. You just cast the spell and it does damage. It's the damnedest thing. Is magic overpowered in Dark Souls 1 and underpowered in Dark Souls 3? Or is it, you know, like, is it either? I don't know. When you consider how game development works, Dark Souls 1 ended by giving us all these dark magics, and then Dark Souls 2 made use of a lot of hexes, which are dark magic. Then Dark Souls 3, not a lot of people used sorceries as an invader, coming from an invading background, coming from the background that I experienced, in my opinion. Spells were sort of good for gankers, bad for invaders. Stuff like Chaos Bed Vestiges, Crystal Soul Spear. If you had 2 or 3 friends playing with you, you know, spells were great. Otherwise, not so much. In Dark Souls 1, it feels sort of the opposite. Whereas I tried to like Affinity in Dark Souls 3 and just never got anywhere with it. Pursuers is absolutely magical. It feels like I've given myself a teammate for a few seconds when I cast it. I also took Chaos Dude, and I leveled him up to 81, and I gave him a bunch of Pyromancies. And the fact that Pyromancies don't scale with any stat, again, is it overpowered in Dark Souls 3, or is it underpowered? I'm sorry, is it overpowered in Dark Souls 1, or is it underpowered in Dark Souls 3? The fact that Pyromancies don't require any scaling. Now, one thing that, as someone who never played with a lot of spells, I put spells on my build, and now all of a sudden I have to make this decision, of how to use the spells. And oftentimes I find myself relying on them too much. And maybe in situations where I could just play melee, but the spells are so fun, I'm trying to find uses for them, Like if someone's walking around turtled up with a shield, Great Combustion or Black Flame works great in that situation. It also works well as a wake-up, but I'll use it in situations other than that, just to do it, just to have fun with it. So I find myself over-relying on them a little too much. I played around with a bunch of Pyromancies. Great Fireball, Fire Whip, Chaos Whip, Fire Tempest. Something like Great Combustion or Black Flame, that's not negotiable. You have to have one of those two, in my opinion. And then Fire Tempest is non-negotiable. It's just too good at killing everybody, or killing one person. Like if you get a backstab cancel, say you backstab somebody, but they canceled it, and now they don't take any damage, you can use Fire Tempest while you can walk around and they can't, and it's just incredible. It does 1,000,000 damage. And if somebody's really poised up, has a ton of poise, Fire Tempest can hit them multiple times, and each pillar hits for, something like 600 damage or some craziness. Compare that to Dark Souls 3, which, where I came from, each pillar would knock you down and make you invulnerable, and hit for very underwhelming damage. Unless you, made the build all about casting spells. But, that's only part of the fun for me, casting spells. I really enjoy melee combat. I want to, I want my cake and eat it too. And Dark Souls 1 lets me have that. As does, Dark Souls 2. Now in Dark Souls 3, you could still do it. It was just, your spells were going to be very limited in terms of damage. You weren't going to do a lot of damage. And, you needed hit the soft cap or the Sage Ring on Dexterity. Hit the soft cap on Dexterity or wear the Sage Ring so you could cast the spells fast. In Dark Souls 1, I feel a little better off, I don't necessarily have to hit that soft dex cap, which is 30 or 35, not sure. But it makes you cast your spells faster. I don't think it has, I think it's just one soft cap, and then you hit it, and then you're done. Your spells just cast faster. I don't know if there's any benefit going beyond that. But none of my characters have hit that soft cap, and the spells are still fun to play with. So, if you're like me, and you are, and always have been, like a melee dude, I would encourage you to try out some spells. Whether they be the Pyromancies, which you can basically add on to your build for little to no investment, because all it takes is attunement and some souls to level up your Pyromancy, your Catalyst. Or, if you've got like a intelligence build, you can just level up some attunement and slap some spells on that as well. And you get some nice returns. Fire Whip, giving me over 400 damage there. That spell is great at medium range, but you can't do it out of neutral. It has to be in response to something. If someone rolls into you, Fire Whip works. But if someone's running towards you, or just standing still, I don't recommend doing it, because it locks you in place and it basically just leaves you open to be backstabbed. But Fire Whip and Chaos Whip is 2 attunement slots, so I'm not sure it's worth it to go for it. But, we're talking about potentially anywhere from 400 to 800 damage with Fire Whip for 1 attunement slot, as long as you you know, hit somebody with it. Don't try and hit somebody out of neutral with it, because that's not very smart, in my opinion. But it's still a fun spell, and like I said, at medium range, it does really good damage because it'll hit twice. And I don't think it has any sort of... If it has stagger on it that, I don't know, locks them into iframes so that they don't get hit twice, I've not seen that. Yeah. Now, in an earlier video, I showed off some random pyromancy invasions, and I mentioned that my Chaos dude didn't have a spear. So I added the Chaos Blade to my build, and while it's not exactly as good as a spear, it does do the same thing, basically. Which is, it gives me access to that running R1 against people that flip, which gives me a really fast attack. Now, the spear has less recovery frames in between attacks, but the Chaos Blade makes sense thematically for Chaos Dude to have. And it's a cool spell. Not only that, but I'm figuring out that the R1's actually true combo into a lot of stuff, like kick into R1 with a katana is a true combo. So too is the R1 after you cast a spell. For example, Fire Whip or the Chaos Whip. That true combos into an R1 from a katana, which is pretty cool. But I don't use the katana that often, just typically because they're, I don't know, not my favorite sort of weapon to play around with. But against somebody who's, you know, got the spear or the flip ring or somebody that turtles up, the katana is not a bad choice. It does build up bleed, so that helps. But, as I've said before and mentioned in other videos, tying Black Flame to my build that mainly relies on a straight sword is super handy, because it gives me that poise break that I need, which is nice. The Fire Tempest, like you just saw, I'm using it. If there's any difference in elevation between you and your opponent, and you want to hit them with Fire Tempest, always be above your opponent. Don't cast it when you're below them. I have no luck at all hitting anybody if I'm below them when I use Fire Tempest. If they're below me, if I'm above them and I use Fire Tempest, it works out just fine. Or, of course, if you're at, like, you know, just a equal, normal standing, that works too, if you're on, like, flush level ground. My favorite thing about Fire Tempest, though, is the damage. The damage is just absolutely insane. This is one of those spells that, if you can just get away from a gank squad long enough to get into a corner and cast Fire Tempest, if you can get the full cast off, you'll get rid of the gank squad. One way or the other. You'll either kill the host, or you'll kill some of the phantoms. It's just that good. And Fire Tempest only takes up one attunement slot. In order to get Fire Tempest, you have to have an Ascended Pyromancy Flame, which means you have to talk to Quelana and Blighttown, but you also have to kill the Bed of Chaos, and then she'll give you Fire Tempest. If you don't do that, then you can still have Firestorm or Chaos Storm, but Chaos Storm is 2 attunement slots, and Firestorm doesn't do as much damage, I don't think. So, Fire Tempest, definitely the way to go. The Pursuers and Dark Orb, not Dark Bead. I always want to say Dark Bead, even though it's not Dark Bead. Are just absolutely total meta plays. And I say that because everyone expects Dark Bead. So if you cast Pursuers or Dark Orb instead, a lot of times what ends up happening is people will mistime their roll because they're expecting Dark Bead. If Dark Bead is a shotgun, then Dark Orb is a high-powered rifle. It casts slower than Dark Bead, but it seems to come out faster. It travels in a straight line. So if somebody's running Serpentine, you're probably not going to hit them. But it works fine against people who back off to Estus, and it does a really good job of forcing a roll from players. If you use it after a backstab and back off, it works well for that. But it's another one of those that I wouldn't cast out of neutral. Pursuers, on the other hand, I feel like you can kind of cast out of neutral because they sort of offer their own built-in backstab protection, which is nice. Pursuers combo into a lot of stuff, which is awesome, especially paired with the Moonlight Greatsword, because that Moonlight Greatsword is slow, so Dark Bead gives you a chance to hit. I would not, and I've tried to break myself of casting Dark Bead. I did it. I've tried to break myself of casting Pursuers and then going for a backstab. It just doesn't make sense, because you'll either get the backstab or you'll hit with Pursuers, but you never get both. You know what I mean? If you get both, it's absolutely devastating for sure. But, in my opinion, just not worth it. Pursuers does awesome damage if they all hit, which is great. But another thing the Pursuers do that's hilarious is a lot of times I'll run into people who try and use the Silver Pendant from the DLC to sort of block dark magic, which is all well and good. But the problem is if you use it to block Pursuers and you do it too early, all that ends up happening is the Pursuers float up into the air, amass into one giant Pursuer, and then come down on top of your head and pile drive you. And it's hilarious. I actually added Pursuers to this build simply because I was having trouble dodging it, and I wanted to see how other people dodged it. The trick to dodging Pursuers is back up and wait for all the Pursuers to come together. Once all the Pursuers are one big Pursuer, just dodge forward. Just roll through it. That's the best way to dodge Pursuers. I've seen other people have luck just dodging it right off the bat. They'll just dodge through it right off the bat, and it seems to work out just fine for them. But I've also seen people mess that up. Taking a page from the old Dark Souls 3 playbook where you would cast, Homing Soul Mass, or Crystal Soul Mass, and then you would cast Crystal Soul Spear, as soon as one took off, and what you're hoping for is that they combo into each other. I'm using that in Dark Souls 1, but I'm using it with Dark Orb and Pursuers, and it's hilarious how often that works. Because the Pursuers, sort of like a really slow, lofty motorcycle, but when they hit, they stun you, because they do physical damage, because it's dark magic. Dark magic does physical damage. So, that works out really great. The Pursuers hit, and then it combos into that Dark Orb, which is just disgusting. The damage, I mean. Magic is one of those things, a lot of people complain about magic in Dark Souls 1. A lot of people complain about a lot of shit in Dark Souls 1. But, I don't know, just kind of used to that at this point. When I started playing Dark Souls 3 PvP 2 years ago, everybody was complaining about everything. And then I was over here trying to have fun with it, and now it's the exact same thing except Dark Souls 1. Everyone's complaining about everything, and I'm over here trying to have fun with it. But, in my opinion, magic is, not overpowered. People complain about Wrath of the Gods, and it's just dodge it. Just literally dodge it. The same thing with Dark Bead. It's not a hard spell to dodge. Neither one of those is a hard spell to dodge, despite Twitter and Facebook comments on Bandai Namco's, hey, we're patching Dark Souls Remastered right now. Everybody says, patch backstabs and patch God of Ratch, which I assume that was supposed to be Wrath of the Gods. I love playing with these spells. It's been a lot of fun. And if you've not played with any spells in Dark Souls 1 yet, definitely give it a try. Go for it. I'm not saying make a dedicated spellcaster, because like me, the majority of the fun that I have in these games is the melee combat. But I was sleeping on spells, man. I was sleeping on them hard. They're fun. They're a lot of fun. I've already gone over how much I like miracles and stuff in this game. The sorceries and the pyromancies are also just as fun. I love them. And this right here, where the guy's got the gold tracer. Now I switched to the spear, which, I would have done that regardless. But I still would have had to have played, I'd have to be on my toes. If that guy goes on the offensive, I have to play on my toes, But with spells, I can force a roll from him, and then once I've forced the roll, I can go on the offensive with the spear. Now, if it's 2 or 3 gold tracers, obviously all bets are off, and just good luck. Try and do the best you can. But against that 1 gold tracer, being able to just turn that on that dude's head, it's good stuff. Project Jimmy, who I fought multiple times here. GG's to Project Jimmy. Had a bunch of good fights with this guy. I think we had 2 or 3 fights over the entire course of, like, I invaded him from the Demon Ruins all the way to the Bed of Chaos, and I think we had 3 fights. All of them were, you know, pretty good, a lot of fun. Jimmy knows what he's doing. This is a nice example of how you can never turn your back on your opponent. I mean, even just for a split second. Jimmy was doing a good job there, and for whatever reason, he went to dead angle that last attack. I'm not sure why, but it turned his back, and so my ravioli step that I was going to use just put me in even better position to backstab him than I had originally planned for. Now, I'm still level 81 with the Pyromancer that you're seeing right here, and with the Sorcerer, I'm still level 118, so basically meta level. And I'm pretty much finding invasions wherever I want them. So it's not slowed the game down much at all. Real talk, I think maybe I should have made the Sorcerer and kept him at soul level 81 as well. But, you know, I'm cool with the meta level. But I think I probably could have made him meta level and not sacrificed too much. The Pyromancer being 81 really has sort of cemented, and that's not even a good 81. I gave him way too much dexterity. He's got 22 dex, and so I mean, like, I could have, if I was going to keep him 81, I could have, you know, put more points into endurance or more points into, you know, vitality, and been even better. But the point I'm trying to make is 81 feels really generous. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if I took this dude up any further, it would all just be vanity points. You know, basically just taking his vitality to 50 and his endurance up to whatever. Also, taking the Sorcerer up to 118, I did get to do, like, I really like his fashion now. I call it Junkyard Chic. He's wearing the Balder chest with the crystalline helm, and then the Knight leggings, and it's the Balder gauntlets. So Balder chest and gauntlets, Knight legs, crystalline helm, Junkyard Chic. Back on the topic of the Sorcerer, by the way, the Pursuers, I'm finding if you don't lock on, you don't even have to do the annoying, stupid backstep tech to avoid them firing off. You can just not lock on and they won't fire. That Junkyard Chic, man, I love it. Dark Souls 1 feels like the only one where the fashion really gets the point across that you're, you know, in an undead kingdom. You know, it's after, like, the zombie apocalypse has occurred in medieval sort of, you know, fantasy world. So the idea that, you know, all these armors look like they're falling apart at the seams, the Balder and the Hollow Soldier stuff, the chess pieces, where other games, you know, maybe like ripped the cape up a little bit, you know, like it feels sort of superficial compared to just your entire armor looks like it's falling apart, which I really like that. I think it's cool. It fits the theme, fits the aesthetic. I'm not sure. I'm so used to, like, rapiers and daggers having a higher crit modifier that I swapped to Velka's rapier for my crits with the Sorcerer, but Velka's Rapier doesn't have a higher crit modifier. It is split damage, and you're doing a critical attack, which should ignore the split defense. So it's not, you know, you're not bad off there. But I don't know if it has, like, I don't know if Dark Souls 1 had, like, the secret motion modifier values, you know, that made daggers absolute nightmares in Dark Souls 3 for riposts. And also, you know, I think thrusting swords also had a higher motion value. But Velka's Rapier seems to do really good damage. Plus, I just like having Velka's Rapier, so swapping to it for crits. I don't think I'm missing out on a shit ton of damage. What I'm saying is I might be better off just using the Moonlight Greatsword for crits, but it's too fun. Doing weapon swaps is too much fun, and I can swap to Velka's Rapier. It's nice. Velka's Rapier, not a fantastic main weapon, but in one of the previous invasions you might have noticed, I just chucked my chest piece and swapped Havel's Ring for the Hornet Ring, and switched to Velka's Rapier and just went backstab fishing against a guy who camped me. He was camping the spawn point with Gold Tracer, and he was wearing the Giant's armor. So, you know, that's a nightmare to fight against if, you know, you're like me and you're playing like these suboptimal builds. This, I have no idea what kills me right here, but it did. But $40. I wanted to show off that invasion because Fire Tempest hit the host. It hit him twice on one cast, and then the Great Fireball did just absolutely melted that Phantom, which was hilarious. I love that spell. Again, I don't think I could recommend the Chaos Fireball with its 2 attunement slots, but, you know. There's the Fire Whip or Chaos Whip, either one works. True combo into the katana, which is just absolutely devastating. Shout out to Peeve Peverson. One thing that's rough, you see in this fight I spawned in with the Falchion. The Pyromancer doesn't have anything that can immediately save him, like the Miracle build has Wrath of the Gods, the one I showed off in the Nightly Invasions. Pyromancer doesn't have anything like that. So Pyromancer spawns in with the Falchion. If I'm invading in this area, and you spawn in with the Falchion, and if they're right on top of you, you just mash R1 and hope for the best. If they're like twop camping you. Now, since these guys weren't twop camping me, they were right on top of me, but they weren't, you know, that wasn't through any fault of their own. They were just playing through the level, and they just happened to get an invader right at that moment. So I didn't, you know what I mean? I could just actually play the game. And I love this invasion. This invasion is just probably the best played invasion out of the whole bunch, where I'm fighting these two opponents and I'm doing a good job of keeping them split up in between critical attacks, chaining my critical attacks, throwing in spells as necessary for wake-ups, throwing in Black Flame to mess with this parry spammer. The only thing I did wrong in this invasion, in my estimation, is I spawned in with the Wolf Ring, which is good. You should spawn in with the Wolf Ring, because if they're spawn camping you, you're going to need to poise through that initial barrage they're going to just lay on top of you. I should have swapped to the Hornet Ring after I, you know, also swapped away from the Falchion, because this fight would have been over way earlier. But I enjoyed that it lasted that long, because it was fun. But that's my video. If you haven't tried spells in Dark Souls 1 yet, give them a shot, because they're fun as hell. Later, y'all.